How long have you been blind? The question landed harder than the fall. 1 second, I was standing at the top of the marble staircase outside the executive conference room, counting the steps under my breath like I always did. 21, 22, 23. The next second, my shoe found empty air. My stomach dropped, my balance vanished, and a strong arm caught me around the waist before gravity could finish embarrassing me in front of the most intimidating man in corporate America. Grant Whitmore, Alpha CEO, billionaire, human winter storm. Of course it had to be him. My folding cane slipped from my coat pocket and struck the floor with a sharp metallic snap. The sound echoed through the empty hallway. Grant looked at it. Then he looked at me. At least, I assumed he did. Faces had become soft blurs months ago, and in the dim emergency lighting, he was little more than a tall shadow wrapped in an expensive suit. Still, I knew exactly where he stood. His cedarwood scent was controlled but unmistakable, and his breathing had gone strangely still. I pulled away from his arm too quickly and nearly lost my balance again. Smooth, Noah. Very convincing. Nothing says perfectly capable employee like attempting the same fall twice. I am not blind, I said. Grant was silent. That was worse than anger. Grant Whitmore could make silence feel like a performance review. I crouched, reaching for the cane, but my fingers swept over cold marble. Before I could search again, his voice came from 3 feet to my left. It is beside your right hand. He did not pick it up for me. He did not grab my wrist or guide me like I was helpless. He simply told me where it was. I closed my fingers around the handle and stood carefully. Thank you. You counted the steps. My throat tightened. I count when I am tired. You count every morning from the elevator to your desk. The hallway seemed to shrink around me. I had spent 6 months memorizing this building. 38 steps from the lobby turnstile to the elevator. 12 from the elevator to my department. 7 from my chair to the printer, assuming nobody moved the recycling bin. I arrived before sunrise so no one would see me using screen reading software. I stayed late so no one would notice how close I held documents to my face. I had built my entire career out of routines, memory, and the hope that nobody looked too closely. Apparently, Grant Whitmore had been looking. You cannot fire me for this, I said, though my voice betrayed me. My work is accurate. My performance reviews are excellent. I have never missed a deadline. I did not say I was firing you. You did not have to. His footsteps moved closer, then stopped at a respectful distance. How much can you see? I hated the gentleness in his voice. Gentleness was dangerous. Gentleness made it harder to stay angry. Enough. That was not my question. I tightened my grip on the cane. Long enough to know what happens when a company decides an Omega is a liability. Grant inhaled slowly, and long enough to assume I already made that decision. I lifted my chin toward the blur of him. Did you? Another pause. Then his voice lowered. Noah, I knew 3 months ago. 3 months ago. The words should have relieved me. Instead, they opened a trapdoor beneath every memory I had carefully labeled safe. I heard Grant shift his weight, the faint brush of wool against wool, and suddenly I was back on my first morning at Whitmore Holdings, standing in the lobby with a coffee I was too nervous to drink. I had arrived at 6:15, nearly 2 hours before orientation, because empty buildings were easier. No moving obstacles. No curious coworkers. No one asking why I paused at doorways or tilted my head when someone spoke. I had spent the previous weekend studying the floor plan until I could picture every corridor. 38 steps from the security gate to the elevator. 12 from the elevator to the analyst bullpen. 7 from my desk to the printer, unless someone abandoned a chair in the aisle, which happened often enough that I had developed a personal grudge against office furniture. I thought I was careful. I thought I had turned survival into professionalism. Then Grant Whitmore walked into my interview and ruined the illusion without saying a word. I recognized him by the silence that followed him. Conversations softened. Chairs stopped moving. Even the air seemed to straighten its tie. He sat across from me while the hiring panel asked about quarterly forecasting, market risk, and a merger model I had submitted the week before. I answered every question. Not well enough. Perfectly. When one executive challenged my numbers, I corrected his formula from memory. Grant said nothing for almost 20 minutes. Then he slid a printed chart across the table. The text was too small. I could see blocks of color, but no labels, no numbers, no useful detail. My pulse climbed. I leaned forward slightly, pretending to study it. What is the weakest assumption? He asked. I could have guessed. Instead, I remembered the source data and said, the customer retention estimate. It assumes the market stays stable for 18 months, but the industry average has already dropped 4% this quarter. Silence. Then Grant tapped the paper once. That is correct. I got the job that afternoon. For 6 months, I told myself I had fooled him. I learned the sound of his footsteps, measured and unhurried. I learned that his office door opened with a soft hydraulic sigh. I learned that he wore a cedarwood scent blocker during board meetings and none at all after 7. What I did not learn was how closely he watched. The lights near your desk changed 3 months ago, I said slowly. They stopped flickering. Yes. The cleaning crew stopped moving my chair. Yes. The hallway signs were replaced with raised lettering. Grant did not answer, which was answer enough. Heat rose behind my eyes, sharp and humiliating. You did all of that. Facilities did. Because you told them to. Because the building should have been accessible already. His voice stayed calm. No pity. Somehow, that made it harder to defend myself. Why did you not say anything? I asked. Because you had not chosen to tell me. The hallway hummed around us. I tightened my fingers around the cane. And the anonymous email? Grant went still. What email? That was when I realized he was not the only person who had been watching me. Grant turned toward me so sharply that the movement stirred the air. Between us. Noah, what anonymous email? I reached into my coat and pulled out my phone, nearly dropping it because my hands had decided this was the ideal moment to stop cooperating. The message had arrived 20 minutes before the meeting ended, sent to my private account from an address made of random numbers. I opened it with the screen reader muted and held the phone toward him. Read it. His silence lasted 4 seconds. I counted. Of course I counted. Your CEO knows what you are hiding, Grant read, his voice turning colder with every word. Resign tonight, or the entire board will learn that Whitmore Holdings allowed a blind Omega to handle confidential financial data. The hallway suddenly felt much colder. There is an attachment, I said. A picture of me using my cane outside my apartment. Grant did not speak. His cedarwood scent sharpened before he forced it back under control. That frightened me more than anger would have. Grant Whitmore treated emotion like an unauthorized expense. If it escaped, something was seriously wrong. Who has access to this email address? He asked. My doctor. My landlord. Human resources, because I used it on my original application. Anyone at work? Not unless someone accessed my personnel file. His shoes moved once against the marble, then stopped. You are coming with me. I almost laughed. That sounded dangerously close to an order. It was. Then the answer is no. I folded the cane, shoved it into my pocket, and immediately regretted the performance when I lost track of where the staircase began. Grant noticed. Naturally. He noticed everything. My car is downstairs, he said more carefully. I will take you home. I can get home by myself. Someone photographed you outside your building. That does not make you responsible for me. No, it makes me concerned. There it was. The word I hated. Concern always arrived wearing a kind face and carrying a list of things I was no longer trusted to do. I stepped toward the elevator, using the wall as casually as possible. You do not have to help me because you feel sorry for me. Grant followed, but he did not touch me. I do not feel sorry for you. You changed the building. You watch my routines. Now you want to escort me home like I am a misplaced package. You nearly fell down a staircase. Because the lights failed. You could not see the stairs before the lights failed. The truth struck cleanly. I pressed the elevator button harder than necessary. This is exactly why I did not tell anyone. The moment people know, every mistake becomes proof that I cannot do my job. Every offer of help becomes supervision. Every room becomes a test I never agreed to take. The elevator arrived with a soft chime. I stepped inside and turned toward the blur of him. Grant remained in the hallway. Tell me what help looks like, he said. I stared in his direction. What? I will not decide for you. Tell me what you need, and tell me what you do not. The doors began to close. Grant lifted one hand between them, stopping them without stepping closer. I will not grab your arm. I will not take your cane. I will not speak for you. But I am asking you not to go home alone while someone is watching your building. No command. No alpha authority. Just a choice placed carefully between us. I hated how much that mattered. You can drive me, I said. You do not come upstairs. Agreed. 20 minutes later, Grant stood inside my apartment anyway, because the lock on my front door had been tampered with, and for the first time in months, I wished I had left the lights on. Grant did not touch the door. He stood just inside the apartment, listening, while I stood behind him with my cane unfolded and my dignity folded somewhere beyond repair. The lock had not been broken, exactly. The metal around it was scratched, the frame slightly misaligned, as if someone had tested how much pressure it would take to get inside, and then changed their mind. That possibility was somehow worse. "Call the police," Grant said. "Already doing it." I lifted my phone and tried to sound calmer than I felt. The dispatcher asked whether anything had been taken. I almost laughed. My apartment was dark, silent, and arranged with the precision of a map only I could read. I would not know if something small had moved until I reached for it and found empty. Air. Grant seemed to understand before I said anything. "Tell me where everything should be," he said. "I will look. You decide what matters." There it was again. Not control. Permission. I described the room while he moved slowly through it, announcing every step. Sofa along the left wall. Coffee table 3 feet in front of it. Bookshelf beside the window. Kitchen counter straight ahead. He did not open drawers without asking. He did not touch personal items. When he found my laptop bag on the floor instead of the chair, his voice changed. Just slightly. "Did you leave this here?" "No." My pulse began counting for me. Too fast. Too loud. Grant continued through the apartment until he reached the bedroom. "The closet door is open. I always close it." A pause. "May I check inside?" "Yes." The word came out smaller than I intended. He returned a minute later, carrying the faint scent of cold air from the window. "Nothing appears missing. The window is locked. Someone may have searched the room." I hated the image that formed in my mind. A stranger standing beside my bed. A stranger touching the cane I kept by the nightstand. A stranger learning the shape of my life. "I am staying somewhere else tonight," I said. "Good." That was not an invitation. "I know." His answer came too quickly, and despite everything, I almost smiled. The police arrived, took photographs, and asked questions. Grant stayed quiet unless I asked him to speak. When the officers left, he stood near the kitchen while I packed an overnight bag. I could feel him trying not to watch me struggle with a zipper. "Do not say it," I warned. "I was going to ask whether you wanted coffee. At midnight. You look like you need coffee." I look like a shadow wearing a coat. "You look tired." The gentleness in his voice made the room feel smaller. I turned toward him. "Where am I supposed to go?" "A hotel. The person who sent that message may know where I work and where I live. A hotel reservation under my name is not exactly invisible." Grant was quiet for a moment. "Then stay at my house." I stared at the blur of him. "Absolutely not. There is a guest suite. Separate entrance. Security at the gate. You will have complete privacy. You are my boss. Tonight, I am the person with a secure house. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, I am still your boss, and you are still the analyst leading the Halcyon Systems acquisition." That stopped me. "You are keeping me on the deal? I assigned you because you are the best person for it." His footsteps came closer, then stopped before entering my space. "Your blindness does not change that." I swallowed hard. "You make it sound simple." "It should be." An hour later, I sat in the passenger seat of Grant Whitmore's car, holding my overnight bag like a shield. His house was 30 minutes outside the city, behind a quiet gate and a long driveway lined with trees. When we arrived, he described each step before I took it. 3 to the porch. 1 small rise at the threshold. Hallway straight ahead. Guest suite on the right. He opened the door and waited. "May I show you where everything is?" he asked. "Yes." Grant guided my hand to the light switch, the dresser, the bathroom door, and the edge of the bed, never holding me longer than necessary. When my fingers brushed his wrist, he went completely still. "So did I." "You are afraid to touch me," I said. His breath caught. "I am afraid of touching you without permission." Before I could answer, his phone rang. Grant stepped into the hallway, but I still heard the name on the other end. Ethan Caldwell, the chief financial officer. The one executive with access to my personnel file. Grant did not return to the guest room for several minutes. His voice carried faintly through the hallway, controlled and formal, the tone he used when he wanted every word documented by memory. "No, Ethan. Noah remains on the Halcyon acquisition. That decision is final." A pause followed. Then, colder, "His medical information is not relevant to his performance, and anyone accessing a confidential personnel file without authorization will answer for it." I stood beside the bed, one hand resting on the dresser Grant had shown me, trying not to listen while hearing everything. The call ended with a quiet click. Grant stopped outside the doorway instead of entering. "You heard that," he said. "Your house has excellent acoustics. Ethan claims the board is concerned." The board became concerned awfully fast for people who supposedly do not know. Grant exhaled through his nose. "I am investigating who opened your file. You think it was him? I think assumptions are useful only when they lead to evidence." That was the most Grant Whitmore answer imaginable. Precise. Careful. Emotion locked behind polished steel. "And the halcyon deal?" I asked. "We leave for Boston tomorrow afternoon." I turned toward his voice. "We? You and I? The final review is Monday morning. You still expect me to travel after tonight?" "I expect you to decide whether you want to travel. I also expect Halcyon to collapse under questioning if you are not in the room." I hated how effectively he complimented people. No warmth. No decoration. Just a fact placed exactly where it could do the most damage. "I will go," I said. The next afternoon, we boarded a flight from New York to Boston under separate reservations and an impressive amount of mutual denial. Grant worked in silence. I reviewed audio files through one earbud and pretended not to notice that he described every change in the cabin before I needed to ask. The hotel was quiet when we arrived, but sometime after midnight, a winter storm rolled over the city and cut the power. My room went silent. No ventilation. No electronic lock hum. No faint light pressing against what remained of my vision. I found my cane and stepped into the hallway, following the distant sound of someone breathing too quickly. "Grant." His answer came from near the stairwell. "I am fine." That sounded convincing to someone, probably. I moved toward him, tapping the floor lightly. His cedarwood scent was uneven, sharp at the edges. When I reached him, I heard his hand slide against the wall. "The emergency lights should be on," he said. "They are not." I noticed. "I cannot see the exit signs." "Neither can I. Welcome to my area of expertise." He gave a strained breath that might have been a laugh. I held out my hand. "May I?" The silence changed. Then his fingers settled carefully into mine. For the first time, Grant Whitmore let me lead. I counted the doors, listened for the stairwell fan, and guided us toward the lobby while his grip remained steady but warm. Halfway there, he stopped. "My brother died during a building evacuation," he said quietly. I tried to take control. I did not listen when he told me what he needed. The confession hung between us, fragile and unpolished. I placed his palm against the center of my chest so he could match my breathing. "You do not have to see everything with me," I said. His hand stayed there for one heartbeat. Then another. When the emergency lights finally flickered on, Grant did not pull away immediately, and neither did I. The emergency lights stayed on, but neither of us moved. Grant stood close enough that I could feel the warmth of his hand against mine, though his fingers had loosened as if he were giving me every chance to pull away. I should have. He was my employer. I was leading one of the largest acquisitions in company history. Someone had already photographed me outside my apartment, opened my personnel file, and tried to force me out of the company. Kissing the chief executive officer would have been less of a romantic decision and more of a professionally catastrophic hobby. Unfortunately, my heart had never shown much interest in risk management. "Grant," I said. His breathing changed. "Barely. I noticed anyway." "Yes. You can let go now." His hand disappeared from mine immediately. The loss of warmth felt sharper than it should have. "Of course." His voice returned to its usual controlled tone, but something underneath it had shifted. I reached toward him before I could reconsider and found the front of his coat. My fingers closed lightly around the fabric. Grant became completely still. "Noah, I am making a terrible decision. Then I should probably stop you." "You probably should." He did not move. Neither did I. I lifted my face toward the sound of his breathing. "May I kiss you?" The question seemed to surprise him. For once, Grant Whitmore had no immediate answer. Then he said, very quietly, "Yes." I moved closer and touched my lips to his. The kiss was brief, gentle, and uncertain enough to feel honest. Grant did not pull me toward him. He did not take control. One hand rested near my elbow without closing around it, waiting in case I lost my balance. That small restraint affected me more than any dramatic gesture could have. When I stepped back, his breath followed mine for half a second. "That was a mistake," I whispered. "Probably. You were supposed to disagree. I try not to lie to you." I almost laughed. Then the elevator at the end of the hallway chimed, and the moment vanished. Hotel staff entered with flashlights, apologizing for the outage and directing guests toward the lobby. Grant and I separated before anyone reached us, but the careful distance between us felt more suspicious than closeness would have. By morning, the storm had passed. The Halcyon Review began at 9 o'clock in a glass conference room overlooking downtown Boston. I presented the financial discrepancies I had found, including inflated subscription numbers and a retention forecast that did not match the raw customer data. Grant said very little. He did not need to. Every time someone interrupted me, his silence sharpened until they stopped. The meeting ended just after noon. We were gathering our files when Grant received a message. His phone vibrated once. Then again. His cedarwood scent turned cold. "What happened?" I asked. He did not answer immediately. "Grant." He moved closer and lowered his voice. "The hotel security office sent me a recording from last night." My stomach tightened. A recording of what? The hallway camera outside the stairwell. The room seemed to tilt even though I was standing still. It recorded us. Yes. My phone began vibrating in my pocket. An unknown number. A new message. Grant read it over my shoulder after I gave permission. The words were simple. "Withdraw Noah Bennett from the Halcyon deal, or the board receives the video by 5 o'clock. I listened to the quiet machinery of the conference room and understood that whoever was watching us no longer wanted only my job. They wanted Grant too. Grant read the message twice, then placed my phone on the conference table with the care of someone setting down a live wire. "You are not withdrawing," he said. "That decision belongs to me." "Noah." "No. Whoever sent this knows exactly how the board will frame it. A blind Omega on a major acquisition. A private video with the chief executive officer. They will not call it blackmail. They will call it proof." His chair shifted across the carpet. "Proof of what? That I received special treatment. That you compromised the deal. That every correct number I found came from your office instead of my work. None of that is true. Truth is not always the loudest person in the room." The words came out harsher than I intended. Grant went silent. I hated that silence because I knew what lived inside it now. Not anger. Calculation. He was already planning how to shield me, and I was already planning how to stop him. We returned to New York that afternoon. By the time the car reached Whitmore Tower, the video had been sent to every board member. Nobody posted it publicly, which made the threat feel more precise. This was not gossip. It was leverage. My access badge stopped working at the executive floor. Grant used his own card, and the elevator opened onto a hallway full of voices that became quiet when we arrived. I did not need sight to know people were staring. Their scents shifted. Their shoes stopped. Someone whispered my name as though it were a confession. Grant walked beside me without touching me. "The board is waiting," he said. "Then let them wait 2 more minutes." I turned toward my office and found my desk by memory. My resignation letter was already drafted. I printed it, signed it, and held it out. Grant did not take it. "No. You said you would let me decide what help looks like. This is not help. This is surrender. This is me protecting my career before they destroy it for me. By leaving the job you earned." His voice finally cracked through the cold control. "By choosing the ending instead of letting them choose it." The boardroom doors opened behind us. Ethan Caldwell stepped into the hall, his polished shoes tapping a slow rhythm against the floor. "Grant, we need to begin." His tone was sympathetic enough to make my skin crawl. "The directors are prepared to resolve this quietly." Grant turned toward him. "Quietly for whom?" Ethan sighed. "For the company. Noah can resign. The acquisition can continue. No public statement is necessary." My grip tightened around the paper. "You sound very prepared." Ethan paused. "Just half a second." "Enough." Grant noticed it too. "You knew about the video before the board received it," he said. "Everyone knew by then." I did not say when they received it. The hallway went still. Ethan recovered quickly. "This is absurd. So is accessing a confidential personnel file, photographing an employee outside his home, and using hotel security footage to influence an acquisition." Ethan laughed once, but the sound carried no amusement. "You have no evidence." "Not yet," Grant said. "But Noah does." I turned toward him. "I do." Grant placed a folder on my desk. "The inconsistencies you found in Halcyon are linked to consulting payments authorized through Ethan's division." Suddenly, every altered forecast made sense. Halcyon was not the target. I was. Remove me, and no one would challenge the numbers. The boardroom doors remained open. I could feel every person inside listening. Grant spoke clearly. Noah Bennett remains lead analyst. The meeting begins when he is ready. Ethan stepped closer. If you defend him, the board will suspend you. Grant did not hesitate. Then they can suspend me. My resignation letter trembled in my hand. For the first time, I understood the cost of being seen clearly. Grant was not saving me because he thought I was fragile. He was standing beside me because he knew I was right. I tore the letter in half. Open the doors, I said. I have a presentation to give. The boardroom smelled like coffee, polished wood, and fear disguised as expensive cologne. I walked to the presentation table with my cane in one hand and the halcyon folder in the other. Grant stayed 3 steps behind me. Not leading, not guiding, present. Ethan took his seat near the center of the table, his breathing steady enough to sound rehearsed. Before we begin, one director said, Mr. Whitmore must leave the room pending review. Grant did not argue. That frightened me more than if he had raised his voice. Noah, he said quietly, the room is yours. Then the door closed behind him. For one terrible second, I felt every doubt I had spent years outrunning. They did not see the analyst who had rebuilt a flawed acquisition model in 48 hours. They saw an Omega with a cane, a private video, and a convenience scandal. Fine, let them look. Halcyon reported a 91% customer retention rate. I began. The verified rate is 74%. The difference was hidden through duplicate enterprise accounts and delayed cancellations. Papers shifted. Someone cleared his throat. Ethan interrupted. Those figures have already been reviewed. By your division, I said. That is the problem. I connected my laptop to the room speakers and played the recorded approval logs. Every authorization carried Ethan's employee credentials. Every consulting payment led to a shell company managed by his former business partner. The room grew quieter with each file. Ethan tried to explain the payments as standard advisory fees, but his confidence began developing small cracks. A repeated word. A chair moving too often. A breath released too quickly. I did not need to see his face. He sounded like a man watching the floor disappear beneath him. You accessed my personnel file because I found the altered data, I said. You believe my disability would make the board question my competence before they questioned your numbers. That is speculation. The hotel sent the original security request to Grant this morning. It came from an account registered to your executive assistant. Silence. Clean. Complete. The meeting ended with Ethan placed on administrative leave while an independent investigation began. Grant was also suspended until the board reviewed whether our personal relationship affected his decisions. He accepted without protest. I did not. I found him afterward in the empty conference room, standing beside the windows as evening settled over Manhattan. You gave up your position for me, I said. No. His voice came from across the room. I refused to give up your position for mine. I stopped near the table. Someone I loved once told me he could not build a future around a man who would eventually need help finding the front door. The confession escaped before I could contain it. After that, every kind gesture felt like the beginning of someone leaving. Grant crossed the room slowly, announcing his approach with the soft tap of his ring against the table. I knew during your interview, he said. You knew what? That you could not read the chart. My chest tightened. Then why did you hire me? Because you identified the weakest assumption without seeing the chart. Your analysis was the best submission in the room. He placed a document on the table and described exactly where it rested. It was a new employment agreement, transferring me to an independent strategy division that would not report to him, whether he returned as chief executive officer or not. This is not protection, Grant said. It is proof that your career belongs to you. I found the edge of the document with my fingertips. And what do you want? His answer came without hesitation. A chance to know you when neither of us is hiding behind a title. I reached toward his voice. Grant waited until my hand found his. He did not close his fingers around mine until I did it first. 3 weeks later, the board reinstated Grant as chief executive officer with a unanimous vote, which he described as an administrative correction and everyone else described as the closest thing Whitmore Holdings had ever seen to a miracle. The independent investigation confirmed that Ethan Caldwell had accessed my personnel file, arranged the photograph outside my apartment, and used the hotel recording to pressure Grant into removing me from the Halcyon acquisition. Ethan resigned before the board could terminate him. Halcyon withdrew from the deal 2 days later, shortly before federal regulators announced their own review of the company's financial reports. My analysis had not merely protected Whitmore Holdings. It had saved the company several $100 million and an impressive amount of public humiliation. Grant returned to his office. I moved into the independent strategy division under a director who treated spreadsheets like sacred texts and never once asked whether I could find a conference room by myself. My promotion was announced without mentioning my blindness, my Omega status, or the hallway video. It listed my work, my results, my name. That mattered more than I knew how to explain. The company also began a full accessibility review of every building, system, and hiring process. Grant refused to call it Noah's program because, as he told the board, accessibility should not depend on one employee being forced to reveal private medical information. I still teased him for replacing half the signs in Manhattan, but secretly, I loved him a little for it. Yes, loved. The word stopped frightening me somewhere between our fourth dinner and the evening he spent 20 minutes describing a terrible abstract painting because I said the colors sounded interesting. Grant never touched me without asking. He never answered questions for me. When strangers tried to speak to him instead of me, he calmly redirected them until they remembered I was standing there. He did not make me feel independent. He respected that I already was. One Friday evening, he invited me to the rooftop of Whitmore Tower. The air was cool, carrying traffic noise and the faint scent of rain. Grant stood beside me, close enough that our shoulders nearly touched. "The city is bright tonight," he said. "That is not particularly descriptive. There are white lights along the avenue, red lights on the rooftops, and one billboard advertising a perfume that probably smells like expensive disappointment." I laughed. "Better." He described the sunset fading behind the buildings, violet turning to deep blue. I could no longer see the colors clearly, but his voice gave them shape. "The first night you caught me," I said, "I thought everything I had built was about to disappear. I remember. I thought needing someone meant losing control." Grant's hand rested near mine on the railing, waiting. "And now?" he asked. I turned toward his cedarwood scent and the quiet rhythm of his breathing. Then I stepped forward deliberately, trusting the distance, trusting myself, and trusting the man who had never asked me to become smaller so he could protect me. Grant caught my hand, not because I was falling, but because I offered it. Now I know falling is not the same as being helpless. His thumb moved gently across my knuckles. "May I kiss you?" I smiled. "You are the chief executive officer. Learn to take one reasonable risk." His laugh was soft and surprised. Then he kissed me, careful and warm beneath a city I could not fully see. I did not need to see his face to know he was smiling. I knew exactly where he was. And this time, I was not hiding.